I think we got up to Mishnah Daled, which would be on the second. I think that's a good place to pick up from, right? Because Mishnah Gimel is where we were talking about Lishkat Beit HaMoked, and we brought up that the Mishnah here in Tamid does not wholly agree with the way the Mishnah is related in Masechet Midot. And so I mentioned that there's a Gemara in Masechet Yoma that reconciles them, but how that reconciliation is understood by Rishonim, there are different opinions. Excuse me, so I'm going to leave that for another shir. We will go back to it. Mishnah Daled, we may have read, but I think we'll pick up and start reading it again. Nichnesu lishkat hakelim, v'hotziu misham 93 chlei chesef u'chlei zahav. So they went into the lishka where they had the kelim, right? These are vessels that were used for the service in the temple. And they took out from there 93 vessels of silver and vessels of gold. Hishku et Tamid, they watered or gave water to the Tamid, in other words, to the lamb, to the keves, bekos shel zahav, with a golden cup. Af al pi shehu mevaker mi ba'erev, even though he checks from the evening, mevakrin oto le'or ha'avukot, they check him by the light of the torches. Okay, so let's try to get this fixed in time and space. So they go into the lishkat, and they take out 93 kelim. Now, I'm going to jump here to the Bartanura, who explains Tishimu shoshach lekesef u'chezahav. He says, Lo itparesh lama hu tzruchu leminyan shel kelim halal. It's not explained why they needed this number of kelim. In other words, if as we go through, we could start to count the number of kelim that they use, but it's not going to add up to 93. It's not even going to get close. So what's the deal with 93 kelim? ובירושלמי ומסכת חגיגה אמרו כנגד 93 אזכרות שבנבואה חגי, זכריה ומלאכי. That they had 93 kelim in correspondence to the 93 Shemot Hashem that were in the prophecies of Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So that's an interesting point. I mean, it seems to be a very important point. It also doesn't really answer our question. So it's all well and good that there are these 93 azkarot in the Nevuot of Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, but why should that inform us about how many kelim should be taken out in the Beit HaMikdash every day? So
perhaps
this is something.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So
no, go ahead.
I tried to find this in Chagiga and Yerushalmi, and found it. And perhaps we know Haggai and Zechariah are the propaganda for the second Beit Mikdash Shashni, for the second temple. So perhaps there's a hint or a connection in a specific way to connect the Beit HaMikdash with these prophets very near to the Nevuat HaMikdash. And Malachi, that's about Yemei HaMashiach. But two of them are very close to the topic and the theme of Beit HaMikdash, perhaps the rebuilding. So perhaps.
Okay, so actually, yeah, no.
only an illusion of mine.
I'm glad you brought that up. No, I think I'm glad you bring it up because this is where I wanted to go. So the first one question is why these three prophets?
Yeah.
So you almost said it. But say something. You can say something simpler. What do these three prophets have in common?
So Haggai, he is at the time of to propagate and to motivate the Jewish coming from exile to rebuild the second temple, and also Zachariah a little bit later. And Malachi,
all three of them were prophets at the time. All three of them were they were the last prophets. Yeah. All the prophets that come before are earlier. These are the three prophets actually come back in Shivat Zion. They are members of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. Yeah. All three of them. So it's, in other words, what you say is true, but you don't have to, I'm saying you don't have to go that far to say that they were the ones who were pushing it or prophesying about it, although it's true, but at this moment, we can just say that this is what they all had in common. They were there, and they were also people who would have been themselves important in the building of the temple, because we would need their knowledge and their insight in terms of how to rebuild the temple. Yeah. So they were Yesh Lomar, that these three particular prophets are very much associated with this temple, with the second temple.
And Malachi specific is about the topics of defiling, Western defiling Korbanot, and so it's a very short prophecy. It's not about 3 chapters about, and also Haggai, but he spoke about, and his topic is one of the main theme is about defiling and desecrating of Korbanot, and more, not so in the social intention like Yeshayahu or Yirmiyahu. So it's a little bit. So it's also very clear that the connection is.
That's true. But since you mentioned it, we actually learn out there's a pasuk in Malachi that's often quoted. From which we learn out that you don't bring that it's not proper to bring anything less than best, anything that's blemished to the Beit HaMikdash. It's for the purposes of this discussion. I think it's enough to at least I think this is a beginning to understand how they're associated with these kelim. So in one sense, there's something about these three, right, that they have in common, that they were all there at the time of the rebuilding of the temple, and presumably they also all had input into the rebuilding of the temple, and the correspondence of the Hashem to kelim. I can venture a guess about, what that correspondence might be. It could be that, in other words, it could be that in each of them, their prophecies, they understood that the presence of Hashem in this Beit Mikdash was going to be manifest in various ways, including with the kelim. And so, because they use Hashem's name altogether 93 times, maybe this is a sign, maybe they themselves saw this as a sign that this should be reflected in the Beit HaMikdash itself. More than that, I can't say. The other thing is, which I wanted to do, and I honestly didn't get a chance to do, I wanted to review these Nevi'im and count all the Askarot. I want to make sure that the number is what they say it is, and how to make that count. It's not that I don't trust Chazal, but it's first of all, it's a general rule. Like anytime you get a reference like that, it's always good to go back and check. because it's interesting to see what they count as an in this case, what is an azkara? Is everything that we would count as an azkara going to be part of that cheshbon, or was there a special way of counting? So I haven't had a chance to do that. You're all invited to do that yourselves, and see what you come up with. I do think it's quite interesting, right? This is something. This idea of having 93 klei chesed v'klei zahav is somehow mirumaz, right? It's somehow hinted at in the nevuot of these three neviim who were there at the time of the rebuilding of the temple. Hishku et Tamid. So the Bartanur explains samuch l'shpitato. In other words, the Tamid. So Tamid here, as we said, it means the korban tamid. It means the animal that will become the korban tamid, the animal that we will be the korban tamid. And they gave it water to drink close to the time of its slaughter, kadeshie oron nifshat yafet, so that its skin would be easily removed. Right? It will be easy to skin it. Now, I don't know anything technical about this. It's in the other shiur that I give, which is in Sofrut, we actually went into a lot of depth about skin and how skin is worked, because it's an important part of Sofrut to know how to make klaf and kvil and duchsustus and all those different things. And but I don't know enough about the biology of this or the practicalities of it. In fact, when I've learned this, I've gone back and forth on the idea of that meant lahashkot. The hashkot presumably means that they gave the animal to drink so that it would be more hydrated, and since it's more hydrated, the skin itself is going to be more supple, right? It won't be dry. But I'd also occurred, I had wondered about this, but I couldn't find any support for it. Maybe it meant that they actually soaked it with water, like they actually soaked the skin, like the outer part of the animal, not the skin, but the wool. But no, lashkot apparently means that they gave it to drink close to the time that it was going to be slaughtered, so it would be easier to remove the skin. So there was a practical reason. And they used kos shel zahav. They used a golden cup. And Bartanur says, Ita amri guzma katani. Some people say that this is an exaggeration. Delo shel zahav hayam. It wasn't actually made of gold. Ela shel nechoshet zahav. It was made of a copper or maybe a bronze that was nice like gold. And some people say it was actually a golden cup. Because we don't have poorness in a place where there should be richness, right? So we don't use something cheap when we can use something in honor of the temple, in honor of the temple service, that would be makom ashirut, right? It's a place where we want to show richness. Now, when the nechoshet, maybe it was copper, maybe it was brass. If you shine copper very, very well, it can look very nice, but it doesn't really look gold. But brass actually looks like gold. You could mistake it for gold, at least at a distance. So that I was wondering about that myself, but I don't think we have any of those kelim, so we don't really know. So in the Mishnah it said, Afal pishu muvukar mi ba'erev, even though he was checked from the evening before. The Bartanur explains that Tamid ta'un bikur mimum arba'a yamin kodem shchitato. Korban Tamid has to be checked for mish 4 days prior to slaughtering it. Dumya have Pesach, similar to the kid that would be used for the Korban Pesach. right? Because in the Torah, when do they have to take the Korban Pesach? In Pesach Mitzrayim, when they on the 10th, right? So they had to take it 4 days before slaughtering it. So that transferred into this idea of having the Korban Tamid ready at least 4 days before. What would it mean to get it ready? Not just that it's on the premises or nearby, it means that it was mufresh, it was already set aside, and they would check it to make sure that it had no blemishes. So, right, they don't want any last minute surprises when they're taking it up to be slaughtered. So, mevakrino to l'or ha'avukot, they check it by the light of the torches, because as we know, we're still in this, we're still early morning. It's before Zrichat HaShemesh, right? It's before sunrise. It's after the earliest dawn, right? It's after the earliest dawn coming on the horizon, but it's not yet so late. So they have torches in their hands, which they used. What did they use the torches for? Anybody? No?
They went from one spot to another with torches to the Beit HaMoked.
So remember, right? So actually, they started at the Beit HaMoked, and then they split into 2 groups, and they used their torches to go around the inside perimeter of the Beit HaMikdash, and then they met up initially at where they made the chavitin, right, which would have been on the like the southeast side, or the east. It's on the eastern side toward toward the southern wall. So they have these torches in their hands, and so after what done after that, after that b'dika and after Trumat Hadeshin, so then they have gone after the Trumat Hadeshin, they checked to make sure that it was light out and it was man bita, right? And so now they're at this point where they're going and getting the korban itself ready, right? So that's why, right? They still have the torches. So here we are, Mishnah Hay.
So one
Yes.
question: have anybody of us an assumption why, especially 4 days, and why this allusion to the korban shel Pesach? Especially
Wait,
because
I'm
of the
sorry, I didn't hear the
Tamid,
first part of what you said.
because it might be sufficient to do it in the on the evening before. Why it's necessary? What is the sense, perhaps a deeper sense of this analogy or likeness or comparison between Pesach and Tamid, concerning the
Okay, right.
Yamin,
Question.
the 4 days to check before. I haven't any.
So if I want to repeat the question to make sure I got it, because it's a little muffled, but if I understand your question, no, it's just the connection.
Oh yeah.
If I understand, and it's a good question, it's all well and good to say that they checked the Korban Tamid 4 days before, the same way that they checked the Korban Pesach 4 days before. But what's the connection? Like, why would they have done that? So what do you think? Does anybody have any notion of what the connection would be? Or is there a connection?
perhaps about covenant, perhaps Pesach is the Todah, is the example, the archetype of Todah Korban, and perhaps Tamid and Todah. I'm not, so we know that Tamid is not a symbol, more than a symbol for the covenant between Hashem and Israel. I try to resolve it from the side of theology.
Well, okay, so my suggestion is maybe first go for something simpler. So here's a question. Why do you think the Torah had people check their Korban Pesach 4 days before Pesach? Let's start with that.
Okay.
Why would you have done that?
So we know a lot of midrashim about to demonstrate against the Egyptian, and so what for you as holy we sacrifice this for the purpose of redemption, and so we know this all this midrashim, and so what I remember.
No, you're right. Like so, right. So there are various reasons given the midrash, but let's say you don't know all of these midrashim, and let's say you're just reading the text of the Torah, or you can imagine yourself in that generation, and there's a command. You have to take your ish selabayit, and you have to take Asiri l'chodesh, and you're going to slaughter it 4 days later. So what would be a reason that you need to take it 4 days before?
Does it establish ownership?
That's an interesting point, but no, not you wouldn't need to just like for the ownership. And by the way, when I say in other words, if I give you a pshat approach, I'm not trying to exclude anything else. And what I would say is not necessarily going to fully answer the question, but I think this is where I would start from. That think about Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? So they're going to this is going to be the order of things. The command to take the seh is given on Rosh Chodesh. Right, so they 10 days advance notice that in 10 days you're going to have to take a Korban Pesach, and then on the 14th in the afternoon you're going to slaughter it, and you're going to roast it, you're going to eat it, and then you're going to gather up all your stuff and get out, right? And b'chipazon, like you're going to go out b'chipazon. So in this, we actually touched on this. I don't know, Shira, if you did this with us, maybe you did, but we looked at a sugya that talked about this idea of chipazon and what it meant particularly and a little bit conceptually. But what it means in Pshat is that even though everybody who's going to be leaving Mitzrayim is being given advance notice, everybody knows, 2 weeks in advance that they're going to be leaving Mitzrayim, but they also know on the night or the morning when they actually leave, they're going to be going out in haste. So on the one hand, the matzot, they were not allowed, they weren't told that you should bake bread in advance to be ready to have on the night of Pesach. They were told the hefech for reasons that, I'm sure we've all discussed in our lives about the bread and the matan, all of this and that even though they had 2 weeks to make bread, they have to make bread that night. And the same thing, like the Korban Pesach has to be brought that night, and it has to also be cooked very quickly, right? It can only be roasted. Everything has to be done on that night very quickly. So I would say that at least one reason for Hafrashat Haseh from a few days before is going to be whatever you can do to prepare in advance, you should prepare in advance. And for the same reason that here in the Beit HaMikdash, they're going to check it for mumim. So remember also the Korban Pesach had to also be without blemish. So if you just go around and start to get it the day before, maybe you won't find one that doesn't have a blemish, or maybe the one that you thought didn't have a blemish, does have a blemish. So maybe it's simply that the Torah is telling everybody, look, the korban itself, you can take that 4 days before. It's plenty of time that if something is going to happen, like if you're going to see any kind of blemish develop, you'll have time to get another one. I would start there. And in the same, so whether or not there's a direct connection between the Korban Tamid and the Korban Pesach, which I'm sure we could make certain connections, but let's say it's just a practical issue. It's just a practical thing. You don't want to come up here in the temple, you don't want to come up now early in the morning where you've just grabbed a keves and you're about to slaughter it, and all of a sudden you see that it has a blemish. As a lo yafeh, right? It's not something that you do, and that's why they took it 4 days before, and they checked it the night before, and they're going to check it again. So I think you could leave, for our purposes, we could say it was there's a practical aspect to it. You don't want to be doing these things last minute, and you don't, and also mishum kavod of the avodah Beit Mikdash, you don't want to do things as if they're not important, right? As if it's haphazard, it's not planned. So I think that's enough. Yeah.
Those 4 days, do they come from the Gemara? Because they are not mentioned in the Mishnah. Bartanura mentions them, but where does it take them? From the Gemara? Hmm?
It's from the Gemara. So I think that let's continue into Mishnah. And I think we may come back to this question of the significance of the Korban Tamid and its relationship to other Korbanot. What you started to say, Shira, is going to be a little difficult. It's because the Korban Pesach, right, is shlamim, and the Korban Tamid is an olah.
Yeah.
So in that sense, they're qualitatively different.
Yeah.
They're qualitatively different nodes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that there isn't a connection between them, because arguably there's a connection between all the korbanot. We're not going to try to, I think at this moment, because I didn't prepare anything else, I don't try to make it stronger than that for now, but I think we may revisit that. Misha zacha b'tamid, moshcho v'holech lebeit tamid b'chayim. So the one who is zoche in a tamid, what does that mean, Misha zacha b'tamid?
By lottery, by the lot, by the decision of pious. Yes.
Mm-hmm. By the pious, right? So the one who won the pious for the tamid. So what does that mean? The one who won for the... Right, we had 13 people. What does it mean, the one who is zoche b'tamid? Right? Remember what, right? Who was zoche? Mi shochet, mi sorek, mi midashem, mizbeach hapnimi, and so forth. So it doesn't say tamid here. So who was the one who was zoche b'tamid from that lottery? What does that mean?
Hashochet.
Or more likely, shochet, more likely, well, it could be, I would say it would be good, it would be one of two people. Either it would be the shochet, or it would be, who was actually the first one to win the lottery? What was his task?
The rikah. because
Zrika, right? Because
yeah, the most important.
right, we learned this, that even though Shochet is mentioned first, the Mizorek was actually the first, right? Lefikach Zahar Rishon Shigapayis Bazrika. So Misha Zacha B'Tamid, I think, would mean the person who does the Zrika. I think that's what it would mean, right? Because he's the one who's going to be responsible to capture the blood and then take it and sprinkle it onto the Mizbeach. Moshcho v'holech levemit b'chaim. So he pulls it and takes it to, and goes to the place of slaughtering, which we'll look at in a moment. Mishizachu be'evarim hochin acharav. Right, the ones who won the lottery for the limbs go after him. So, and what did that mean? What does it mean? The one who won the limbs, the people who won the limbs. What did it mean actually?
The ones who took the limbs up to the Mizbeach.
Correct, right? Mima ale evarim lakavesh. And then we said, right, and then that divides into all these different people because we have different parts of the animal that are going to be brought. So this was the session. The person who is going to do the zrika, he goes and he's the one who's going to lead the animal to slaughter. He takes him to the place where they do the slaughtering. And then the people are going to take the parts of the animal after it's cut up onto the Mizbeach, up to the Kevesh. They follow after him. So now it tells us about Tamid B'Chaim, right? This place of slaughter. Hayali Tzfono Shel Mizbeach. It was north of the altar. Ba'alav Shmona Mudin Nanasin. And on it, there were 8 posts, 8 small posts. Uravi'it shel erez al gabehen. Square blocks of cedar were on them. U'un klayot shel barzel hayu kvuin bahen. And hooks of iron were fixed in them. Ushoshas darim haya lekol echad ve'echad shebahen tolin umafshitin shebahen tolin. And there were 3 sets on each of them that they would hang on. Umafshitin al shulchanot shel shaish shebein ha'amudim. And then they would skin the animal on tables made of marble that were between these posts. Okay, so this is a little confusing, and let's see how they're different. Here also, there are different understandings about exactly how these things looked. So let's look and see how the Bartanura understood it. First, I'll just show you on the map. So this is the map of the Beit HaMikdash that we've looked at before, that's based on the Perush of the Tosfos Yom Tov. So here's the Mizbeach. And this is going to be, these are the 8 Amudim. This is the Beit HaMitbachayim. This is the place that are slaughtered. And let me blow this up a little bit. You can see the way he thought the posts were. Right, so this is a post. There's a square block on top, and then going up the side, there are 3 hooks that were going to be used for hanging the animal and start to strip it. And there are 3 hooks because they had different size animals, right? So you might use the tallest one for a large animal and smaller one for an animal. These are the tables. And yeah, this is roughly the way he sees it. And according to the way it's laid out here, it's very close to this, which is the Beit HaMoked. And over here we have Liat HaGazid, right? So it's this area here. Oops, just a second. This is getting away from me. Here. This is the Rambam's. This is based on Rambam's drawing. It's very similar, but there are some little differences which we may look at. I'm not sure if we'll look at them today, but we may look at them eventually. Maybe let's go back and see how the Bartanura understood what we're looking at. So he says as follows. So Misha Zachabet Tamid Moshchova Holecha Veitamid Chaim. And this Beit HaMitbachim Ayali Tzono Shel Mizbech. It was north of the altar. And he says, the Tamid Olahu, Va'olah Tu'una Tzafon. Right? The Korban Tamid was Korban Olah. And an Olah is required to be brought, its slaughtering has to be in the north. Right? And again, I refer you to the parak of Zvachim that's in the Sidur, Ezehu Mikoman Shel Zvachim, and you'll see all of the Kodshei Klim, Shchitatan B'Tzafon, and Olah is Kodesh Kodeshim. So it had to be slaughtered in the north. Unlike, for example, the Korban Pesach, which could be slaughtered anywhere in the area of the Beit HaMikdash, because it's Kachim Kalim. Shmona Amudim, right? So there were 8 posts. Amudim shel Even Nimuchim. They were made of stone, and they were short. That's the Nanasin, right? They're Nimuchim, like the Uravi'it shel Erez, Chatichot Merubaot shel Erez. Hayu al ha'amudim. There were square blocks of cedar on top of the posts. Lot ke'ein vabim, like hooks. In sinis in las. I didn't look into that, but presumably it means hooks. Hayu kvuim. The hooks were fixed into the posts. And he says, Beltan Revi'iyot shel Erez, they're fixed into these blocks of cedar. The Tolin Bahen HaBehema, and they would hang the animals from them. So the post, according to the way we're learning, the post itself was stone, and there is a block of wood at the top, and that has hooks in it that we used to hang an animal from.
Why 8?
Why 8? I think
is there a possibility of 8?
Possibility of like 8 korbanot all at once.
Korbanot?
Yeah. Yeah, so when would that, so there are lots of possibilities.
Yes, and at Sukkot, no?
First of all, I mean,
no, this is
on Pesach, there's going to be a lot more than that. But yes, on the holidays and even, on holidays.
No, they are more.
No, but they had to right. Besides the parim, like they had parim, they had ayalim, they had there are a lot of animals that are being brought, and you could argue that 8 isn't enough for some days. So why exactly there are 8? I'm honestly not sure. I don't know, and hopefully we'll find out more, because you might argue that you would need more than that. It may have also just been a matter of how much room there was, right? The maps that I'm using are quite crude. It's hard to tell from there exactly how much room really being taken up. But so in short, I'm not really sure. Ushoshas darim, and there were 3 sets or 3 orders shel unkliyot of the hooks, zu lamal mizu, one on top of the other. Haya b'chol chatichat eitz, that was on each block of wood. Lidlot behema gedola uktana, right? So they were at different heights, so that you could hang either a large animal or a small animal. And then they would do the hafshata, they would do the skinning al shulchanot shel shayish shebein ha'amudim. There would be tables of marble between the amudim. So we didn't see that. That's not the way they did the picture. Presumably you had 8, right? You had the 8 amudim, and in between each one of those, there's a table, right? Which would make sense. It would be more convenient, because they're going to slaughter it, and then they're going to hoist it up onto the hook, and they'll skin it, and then they're going to take the body and they're going to put it onto a slab of marble in order to cut it into pieces. Shalehem, right? So on these tables, shalehem medichin hakravayim, they would clean out the innards. Vaya efshar lasotan zahav. It would have been possible to make them of gold, because of what we said earlier, shein aniyut bimkom ashirut, because we don't want to have something poor, right? Something less expensive, something cheaper in a place where we're trying to display wealth. V'lo asu'um ela shel shayish, but they only made them from marble, lefi shehazahav martiach umasriach, because the gold is going to heat up, and it's going to cause the animal to start to stink, right? Whereas the marble will retain cold more easily. It's not going to heat up even on a hot day. And also, this is very early in the morning. Vashayish mikarer mitzanein, right? The marble is going to cool it and make it cold. And it's going to hold it so that it doesn't stink. So there was a practical reason. So as I say, sometimes the reasons are just practical reasons. So this is what they're. What's that?
They don't speak about the ta'ala for the blood. I think that should be a lot of it.
Oh, there is. There is
well,
some.
right. So,
there is some.
Right, we mentioned it earlier. There's a talan of there's an amma that goes west. It's west of the mizbeach that leads the blood, the excess blood out. I don't know in this area. Presumably,
this is on the mizbeach, but you should also have it in the Beit Mitbachayim.
Well, why don't they necessarily have the same thing in the Beit HaMitbachayim? Why wouldn't they? What are they going to do with the blood?
The blood is collected.
Right. In other words, the person who's going to do the zrikah, he's going to be right next to the animal when it's slaughtered. He's going to collect the blood. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be some other blood that's going to come out later, but the blood that's going to spurt out of the animal, that's the blood they're going to capture and bring it to the mizbeach. And then like we said in an earlier shir, there's a ta'ala, there is an amah that goes just next to the mizbeach, to the west of the mizbeach, that is going to carry out any excess blood. So there, and we'll see later on. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember now where this is in Tamid or Midot, but they would clean the floor of any blood at some point. But I think that the most blood is going to come out at the point of slaughter. So I think that's why there isn't necessarily any mention of that here. Okay, let's go on. Let's look at Mishnah. Okay, and boy, there's so much stuff I wanted to get ready for this, and I really apologize. But let's read through. We'll do the best we can, and I really will try to fill this out better. There's a lot of stuff here that's going on. Misha Zachat, right? So we're on page 3. Misha Zachat b'dishun mizbeach hapnimi v'hamnorah hayu makdimin. So the ones who won the lottery for cleaning the mizbeach hapnimi, the internal mizbeach. Excuse me, that was you. What was the right? So that mizbeach was the mizbeach for what? For the Ketoret. So somebody, right? So the person who's going to clean the mizbeach for the Ketoret, the person who's going to do dishun ha-menorah, who's going to clean the menorah, they would go first. They would go in front. Who would they? What does it mean? Who are they being makdim? Who are they going in ahead of? Or going early?
It would have to be done before the shechita.
Well, this is where we're going to get into the order of what was done in the morning. So, and again, this we will go into. I think I'm going to want to do the Gemara in Yoma where there's a discussion about the thing, and it's going to get a little technical. So for the moment, just based on the Mishnah, this is the order of things would be Misha Zacha b'Tamid Mosov Alech leBeit HaMitbachayim. He would go to the Beit Mitbachayim, and the people who are going to take care of the Evarim are going to go after him. But so far, as Michael is indicating, they haven't actually slaughtered the Korban Tamid at this point. So they're getting it. What it sounds like is while they're getting ready, the people who are going to do Dishun Mizbeach HaPnimi and the Menorah, they go ahead of them, and Arba'a Kelim Biadam, they're holding 4 Kelim, Hateni v'Hakuz u'Shnei Maftachot. Right, so we'll see what these are. But basically, the Teni is like Lashon Tena. In other words, it's like a basket. The Kuz is like a pitcher, and they're each holding that, and they have 2 keys. Teni domel tarkav gadol shel zahav. The Teni is like a big tarkav of gold, right? Which may not be a helpful definition because you may not know what a tarkav is, but it's a large kli. Machzik kabayin v'chetzi. It holds 2.5 kav. V'akuz domel kiton gadol shel zahav. The kuz is like a large pitcher of gold. U'shnei maftachot. They have 2 keys. Echad yored la'amat hashechi. V'echad poteach kevan. Right. So let's see what all these things mean. Ateni is right. Halashon v'samta batena. Right. Where does it say that v'samta batena? I didn't put the marem I forgot. Anybody know? Sound familiar? You place in a basket.
From the first fruits, bikurim, no?
Exactly. It's in Parshat Purim. It's in the in Kitavo, and that's Lashon HaTorah. The Torah, you put it in a tena. You put it right. You samta b'tena. So the teni was a kind of a basket. Domeh l'sal is like a basket. Upiv rachav. It had a wide opening. The kuz kion b'lashon Aravi korin al kuz. Right, so kuz, he says, seems to be Arabic, and it's a kiton, it's like a pitcher. Shnei maftachot, miftach shnei manulim shebepishpash hatzfoni. There are two keys that are going to open up two locks that are in the northern wicket. We'll come back to that in a moment, but. That means, in other words, in order to enter into the part of the Mikdash in order to enter into the Kodesh, they're going to have to pass through a pishpash, one of these wickets, one of these doors within a door, and they have to open it every morning. So it needs two keys. So they're holding the keys to open it. Tarkav. So that's right. We said the teni is like a tarkav. So what's a tarkav? Kli shemachzik shlosha kabin. It's a kli that holds 3 kav. The lashon tarkav. Tarkav is like a portmanteau. It comes from the words trei v'kav, 2 and a kav. As if it right. V'domeh hayal tarkav or trei v'kav. Would imply that there's 2 kav and a kav, right? So it would be 3 kav, right? It's a kli that holds 3 kavim. The domeh hayalatar kav. So this teni was like a tarkav, but it wasn't as big. Of lo haya machzik ela kabayim v'chetzi. It only held 2.5 kav, not 3 kav. V'shel zahav haya, and it was made of gold. Right, so then it says they had 2 keys. Echad yored la'amat hashechi. One goes down to the amat hashechi. So the Bartuna says a pishpash hatzfoni. That's the northern wicket. Dinan lekaman ba lo lepishpash hatzfoni. When he comes to the northern wicket, ayulo shnei manulin. It had 2. Echad haya lamata bifnim b'tachtito shel petach. One of them, hold on a second. I may have to, this is making noise, but, oh no. Sorry. It's not important. I'm waiting for this person to come. I thought he was trying to signal. One of them, one of the locks was inside at the bottom of the door. The Kohen who wanted to go in, he would reach his hand into a hole that was in the wall. Ad beit hashechi. He would put his whole arm in until it got to his armpit. Upotech biyado derech panim, and then he would, I guess, curl his around and stick the lock in the door. The key could only be used from the inside, so he had to stick his arm into the wall and through the wall, and then reach around and open that lock from the inside. So that's why they called it Amat Hashechi. It was this where you had to reach in all the way up to your armpit. The other Kohen, right? Potech b'maftech miyad below torach Kishar kol haptachim. The other one, there was another lock on the outside, and the Kohen would just open that outside lock normally. What does it mean kevan? Klamar maher below torach. Kevan means that it could be opened easily or quickly. Okay, it was this very special way that they would get into the Kodesh every morning. They had to go through this special unlocking of the doors. This is, I think what we'll do, let's read a little further, and then I'm going to have to stop early. And God willing, next time I'll be more prepared. But I did want to say, I'm not sure that I'm going to give Shir next week. Because I've been feeling very overwhelmed, I may take Hanukkah off, but I'll let you know in the next day or so. So I apologize in advance, because I usually don't cancel because of Hanukkah, but my life has been getting increasingly hectic, and I don't want to come next time and not be prepared. So I may take a week off and do a little bit of, to catch up on some things. I'll let you know in the next day or two. Let's read a little further. So he comes to the northern wicket. This is also described in Masechet Midot, if you want to look. There are two wickets at the great gate, right? The large gate. This is the gate that's leading into the Ulam. Hold on, let's look at a picture. We're only going to be able to see it from on top, and okay. In the Rambam's depiction, you see here it says Shar HaUlam. And then this is the Ulam, this area here. And then there's Shar HaGadol. So the Shar HaGadol is the Shar that they're going to go in through in order to take care of the Mizbeach Zav and the Menorah. Right, that's what they're coming into now. So we're looking at this, as it were, from above, but if you're looking at it from the front, you can imagine it as being, let's say, two very large doors, and then in each of the doors there are smaller doors, right? And one is in the north, one of the Pishpashim is in the north, and one is in the south. שני פשפשים היו לשער הגדול, אחד בצפון ואחד בדרום, שבדרום לא נכנס בו אדם מעולם. No one ever went through the southern door. וירב הוא מפורש על ידי יחזקאל, ויאמר אלי השם, השער הזה סגור יפתח, ואיש לא יבוא בו, כי השם אלוקי ישראל בא בו, והיה סגור. Okay, so this is the in Yechezkel's vision of the temple. He would Hashem told him that this shar is going to always be closed, and it was understood to be this the southernmost wicket, the southern pishpash. So he would take the key, he would open the pishpash, נכנס לתא, ומן התא אל ההיכל, עד שהוא מגיע לשער הגדול. הגיע לשער הגדול, העביר הנגר ואת הפותחות ופתחו. לא היה שוחט השוחט עד ששומע כל שער הגדול שנפתח. Right, he had to go through the entryways. So we saw it. So the first sha'ar that they go through is what we saw in the pictures is the ulam, right? So the sha'ar to the ulam, and then it's hold on a second, I think. Let's see.
Excuse me. For the first sha'ar, they go through the pishpesh, through this small door, yes? And the second sha'ar, they open the whole sha'ar. That's what you
Yes.
read?
Yes.
I must say that something about the quote of Yecheskel looks strange, because first of all, Yecheskel saw the Beit HaMikdash something huge, large and huge, yes? And I don't understand how the Kadosh Baruch Hu would go through the pishpesh. For him, obviously, he would the sha'ar would open and not the pishpesh. So, no, it looks strange.
I think, since I'm gonna be wrapping up this week, we are definitely going to go through this more carefully to get a better idea of what's going on. But I'm going to leave Yecheskel for a moment, but I do want to try to get us fixed in geographically. In order to get this, let's just go up here for a second. Look at the Bartanura. Shnei pishpashin hayu lo l'shar hagadol. So he says the shar hagadol hu shar hahechal, vayu lo dlatot b'tchilat ovi hakotel. So this is the shar of the hechal. So remember, a shar that goes into the ulam, and then from the ulam into the hechal. In between those two places, or in other words, in between the two sha'arim, is a ta, right? There's like a chamber there that's in between the shar of the ulam and the shar ha'ichal.
Like the entrance to a town. This is also called a ta, between the two sha'arim when you go into a city. It's called a ta.
Like an anti-chambrieren, an antechamber.
Yeah, an antechamber.
From audience,
Yes.
You are the guardians by the king of the king. So the ruler, you must wait in this place before. It's like anti-chambrieren, in anti-chambrieren.
Right. You don't just walk in. You don't just walk in. Wait, Paul, what are you saying? What is called the entrance to a city? You mean like they have here in the old city?
Yes, no. All the cities at that time, they had a double sha'ar. They had a first sha'ar,
They had a double
second
sha'ar, right?
And what was inside is called the ta.
I didn't know that. So I think it's called a ta in Hebrew because of this Mishnah. It
may be. Yes.
And I think that's where they get the language from. Vayulo dlatot b'tchilat ovi hakotel. So there were doors that were fixed in the front part of the thickness of the wall, meaning the wall is going to be thicker than the door, right? So the doors are in the front part of the wall, like flush with the front part of the wall. Shaya ovyo shesh amot. The wall was 6 amot thick. Were other doors at the end, the sofa view at the end of the thickness of the wall, were toward the inside. I think that's the definition of the ta, right? In other words, you come in through the door. There's 6 amot that separates between the front to the next set of doors, and then at the end of the 6 amot, you have 2 more doors. Ushnei pishpashin hanach shnei ptach These two pishpashim, two small openings. Echad min shar hagadol, v'echad mismalo rachok tzat min hashar. All right, so there's one on the left that's a little bit further away from shar. Oto, or further down. Oto shebedarom, the one that's south, right? Which, if you're standing in front of the door now, the tzfoni is on your right, and the darom is on your left. So the one that's on the left, shebedarom k'tiv sguri yad lo yipatech. That's the one that that the pasuk in Yechezkel is about, that it will be closed, it will not open, b'shel atid, in the future. Mistam aken haya bebeit olamim. And Yechezkel's vision is the vision of the third temple. So they're saying, he's saying, Mistama minastam ken haya bebeit olamim. That's how it was in the Beit HaMikdash as they knew it. Right, so the northern one, that's the one he would open by sticking his arm into this hole, got up to his shoulder, up to his armpit, and he would bend his arm, and also through the second lock that they could open up easily without any trouble.
This pishpesh was, I thought at the beginning that it is a part of the shar, but it seems that it is another door through the wall, a smaller door through the wall.
I think the truth is, I still understand it to be. I still understand it to be part of the door, because I think that's the definition of the pishpash. But I think the way you opened it is that there was a hole in the wall to reach in, and then pull around. But the shar itself would have been like a big shar, and on the one side would be this pishpash, and on the other side there would be this pishpash. But the pishpashim would be very close to the walls. Paul, I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
This pishpesh belongs to the shar. It's an opening in the shar. It's not an opening in the wall. Another smaller door.
That's how I understand it. That's how I understand it. It's yeah, and I don't remember if I showed you this, but I mean, I've seen these. You've seen these in old buildings. Certainly, I've seen them in Europe in like cathedrals. They have them, right? These huge doors, and then the door you actually go in. Right, so you would only open the huge doors, like say, like if a king came in or something like that, it would be very majestic. But so that dugmato, that's how they had it Beit HaMikdash. Unfortunately, I have to stop now. It's a little bit early, but this is all worth going through, and I will do my best to be better prepared. And in terms of the what I wanted to do with Megillat Tamid, I may or may not go back to that immediately, but I will, b'li neder, I'll send all of you a sheet that has all of the mekorot that I found, and you're welcome to look through it yourselves, and hopefully at some point we'll talk about it some more. One of the things I did want to point out about that, just to finish off, and also Likrat Chanukah, we mentioned, it was appropriate that we open with the Chashmonim at the time of Hanukkah. And maybe I mentioned this also last time, but it's interesting to think about what all these realities were. That is, right now we're discussing the Beit HaMikdash as it looked at the end of Tkufat Beit Sheni, and this was Beit HaMikdash that was Meshupatz Yidei Hordus. So this is not necessarily exactly the same way it looked at the time of the Chashmonaim, or even at the time of, right, earlier of Malachi, Zechariah, and Chagai, certain elements always had to be in place. In terms of if it had to have a pishpash and if it had to have a manu here or things like that, not necessarily. There's discussion about this. The Rambam, and you look at some of the other Mefarshim in Masechet Midot and like Hakdamot Masechet Midot, there's this notion, there's this question actually, what was the purpose of recording Masechet Midot? Because we understand, dafka because of the vision of Yechezkel, that Bayit Shlishi is not going to be exactly like the last Beit HaMikdash. So why do we record it? And I want to amplify that question by pointing out that among the most detailed parts of Tanakh are descriptions of the Mishkan and Beit HaMikdash Shel Shlomo and the vision of Yechezkel. We have all kinds of things that we have to really strive to understand. And there, when I say detailed, they're also midot, right? There's this emphasis, there's this, a lot of attention is paid to the measurements of the Mishkan, the measurements of all the kelim, the measurements of all the way the Beit HaMikdash was for Shlomo and the Yam Shel Shlomo and all of these other parts of the Mikdash. And yes, and Yechezkel also. So apparently it's all very important. But I'll just, there's a lot to think about there, and I'll be, hopefully we will discuss that a little bit more. But I'll just mention something which is talked about in the Mefarshim, which is that even though the next Beit HaMikdash is going to be different than previous Batei Mikdash, but we look to the earlier ones, the idea is that we're always going to be looking at what came before to serve as a basis for what comes next. It's not that the third Beit HaMikdash is going to be like built like a geodesic dome or something like that. It's still going to have certain basic elements that will exist. And B'li Neder, now that I'm saying this out loud, not next time, but as we get more and more and get a better, more comprehensive picture of the way the Beit HaMikdash looked, I do want to show you some sources that relate this idea, that what we learn when we're learning about the Beit HaMikdash is going to inform us about Bayit Shlishi. And in terms of why Midot are so important, I will leave that to all of you to consider, that not just when we talk about Beit HaMikdash, but the idea of Rishuyot and how we define space in halacha is very important, right? We have Rishuyot for Shabbat, we have definitions of the Sukkah that are based on Midot, actually it also spills over, as it were, into civil law, right? When you, in Baba Batra, where it talks about how if you have a chatzer, how do you divide it, and how does it get divided? It has to be like, if it's a certain size, then you could divide it this way. If it's a certain size, you divide it another way. And it's something to think about also, I think, in our lives, things that we may not, we're so used to living within midot. And we ourselves are used to certain definitions of midot that are not spelled out in the Mishnah, but if you drive a car, you know how wide a lane is. If you walk on a sidewalk, you know how wide a sidewalk usually is. If you go into a line at the bank or in the airport or something like that, there's a certain distance that's considered to be normal, right? For how wide you make these spaces. So I pointed out because sometimes people look at this and they say, this is like, what's all this, hakpada on all dot and this and that. The truth is we have midot all around us. It's the way we have built our society. And I think it behooves us to think about why it's important in our daily lives, and then what implications for something like the Beit HaMikdash. What those midot imply when you put them in the context of something holy, which is supposed to be this meeting place of our daily lives with the divine, right? With in other words, I shouldn't say our daily lives, but as the mundane. We're the hedyotot, and we are meeting with the divine, and it's in these very defined spaces. So I'll leave you with food for thought, and thank you very much.